Now, we need to think about a few...
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. Part 4.
You will hear a talk by a university lecturer about the Aboriginal language of Australia. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
We'll begin our course of study this semester by looking at the role of the English language among the native or indigenous peoples of Australia. Aboriginal English, as it is often referred to, was described by one linguist as the first and most significant dialect of Australian English. Over the years, there has been much research in the continent of Australia concerning the use and types of Aboriginal English. Some linguists have suggested that there were literally hundreds of languages spoken by the indigenous or Aboriginal people. European settlers who came to the continent of Australia brought with them their own language, and this was adopted by the Aboriginal people. As a result, many of the languages used by the Aboriginals died off. I should mention that in Central Australia, white settlement began comparatively late, with the setting up of the overland telegraph station near Alice Springs in the 1860s. For the Aboriginal people of Central Australia, the coming of the white man to the area had a negative impact upon their culture and language. However, despite their domination, a number of Central Aboriginal language groups managed to survive quite well. Today, the two main language groups in the area are Warlpiri and Arrernte, also known as Arunta. These dialects are spoken only in remote areas of the continent. These areas include the Kimberleys, Arnhem Land, Far North Queensland and Central Australia. The two major language groups, Warlpiri and Arrernte, are both estimated to have well over 3,000 fluent speakers. Another Aboriginal dialect, known as the Western Desert Language, is spoken by a large group of some 5,000 speakers extending over a 25,000 square kilometre area of Central Australia. So just how many languages were in use by these people? It's difficult to say conclusively, but some linguists have suggested as many as 260, while others quote a more conservative figure of around 200. Regardless of the actual number, there have been many forms of communication among the Aboriginal people, a people who comprise approximately 2% of the current 20 million strong Australian population. It's interesting to note that many Australians refer to Aboriginal languages as dialects, thinking that they are all dialects of one all-embracing Aboriginal language. This is actually incorrect. In fact, all of the original estimated 250 languages were mutually incomprehensible, as different from each other as, for example, German and French. Aboriginal society does, however, provide frequent examples of bilingualism, with some people speaking several languages and dialects. In actual fact, a number of the languages spoken by Indigenous Australians are themselves actually variations of English. A number of these languages have a great deal in common with English, but have their own distinctive words and meanings, as well as accents and grammar. The Aboriginal people view their language as a way to maintain their unique identity within Australian culture. Of those languages studied, about 20 are still being used today. However, as the older generations die off and are replaced by the younger, even these 20 are in danger of being lost. The others, they've all but been destroyed. They remain unused, but live in the memories of the elderly. In some cases, they are trying to be revived by Indigenous communities. In order to do so, the youth must learn to take a greater interest in their cultural heritage, or knowledge of these languages will go to the graves with those who knew them. If we don't act now to preserve these languages, an element of history will be lost forever.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.